the front runner in the Texas Senate race that was running against James Talarico has now dropped out and endorsed Jasmine Crockett. She is a 44-year-old congresswoman. You most likely heard of her. She's very popular in the Democratic brand, but she has everyone knows her in the state, whether they like her or they hate her. Since it's Republican Texas, it's very possible that they hate her. Not most voters. I still think it would be what, around a 10-point win for whoever the Republican nominee is, but James Talarico, I feel like, has a way better odds of winning, especially if he runs on his faith, which, especially if Ken Paxton is a nominee, he can't really counter that. It's when Trump won it by 13 points, he can whittle down that number in his home state, in his home city around Austin, which voted for Biden in this county right here. Let's see what that is. Williamson County. Drive up the margins around Austin. Drive up the margins around Dallas, especially in these suburbs right here where Biden really, really narrowed up the margin there. And especially when we saw Mikey Sherrill drive up the turnout in around the portions of the country where Trump performed best in New Jersey and in New York City, the sharpest shifts to the right and around Newark and Jersey City. And if Talarico can essentially reverse that into anything similar to the Biden turnout in southern Texas, or even greater like Beto O'Rourke did in 2018, this could be a really competitive race. And I do see where not really Jasmine Crockett, but I do see where a world where Talarico wins. Talarico, when he was primarying against Colin Allred, the money raised is no longer here because he dropped out today. But James Talarico with $6 million, a record $6.3 million, and especially when we can see the rising percentage of Talarico, so much so where Allred was at a 7 lead. He wasn't even in this poll. That's how lackluster of a candidate that they saw him. But until he ran, which I forget what the date where he officially ran, 8 points, 12, and then he's winning 48-42. James Talarico has a unique ability to convince voters that he is capable of the job, which I think he is, but especially when he's running on his faith and a consistent message of not really anti, but there's a better word for this, hold on, but pro-worker, and represents of the average Texan, where you have, especially when he's gaining popularity in the Democratic Party from the redistricting fight that happened earlier this year, where the Republicans tried to rig the maps in favor of them by giving them 5 seats and flipping 5 safe Democratic lean districts. It is incredibly important to make sure that voters are on your side, but in order to do that, you have to switch the narrative. And Jasmine Crockett doesn't really have the opportunity to do that, especially with her wide name recognition, good or bad. But in this case, Texas, if she was bad, maybe if she was running for president, which highly unlikely because she's doing this now, but it could have been different, especially when Trump's saying low IQ, low IQ, low IQ. That is controlling the narrative, and these Republicans in this state will never vote for Jasmine Crockett. They will never vote for any Crockett ticket ever. And now, when assuming, which it's a 50-50 primary between John Cornyn, Wesley Hunt, and Ken Paxton, all of them basically getting 30% of the vote in the averages. This race is very close. Ken Paxton has a consistent lead in these individual polls, but ever since Wesley Hunt got in there, his lead has been slipping, and it's almost impossible for Cornyn to win unless Wesley Hunt drops out, which a runoff is most desperate is almost going to happen. In a three-way race, it's going to happen. I certainly do think that Ken Paxton is in the strongest position to win this Republican primary. So if that's the case, how does this translate to the general election? We saw in a Democratic wave year where they were winning the popular vote by 10. We saw that Cruz is only winning Texas by 2.6. And if we really want to compare, if Talarico flips these drives extra turnout in this county and all these suburbs around Dallas, O'Rourke could have won this seat. And especially after Biden did that in 2024, lost. Oh yeah, I just saw Kamala Harris's name, so maybe wrong election, but it wasn't. And when we're seeing these shifts of 13 points in Tennessee 7th with Afton Bain, and we were seeing with Micah Sherrill and Abigail Stamberger, and all of these special elections in Georgia, no Republican can deny that Democrats are outperforming in these elections. And so when Ted Cruz won against Allred in 2024 by 8.5 points, he did worse than Trump did. Cruz did worse than Trump by 5 percentage points. As far as I'm concerned, there is a 5% margin in this race, and there is no excuse why the Democrats can't win this race, unless they pick Jasmine Crockett. She almost definitely cannot win. Usually, name recognition does a good thing to your campaign, but in this race, I really don't think it does. Maybe for the Democratic campaign, it is basically essentially the same thing for the Republican campaign primary, because John Cornyn is really the most electable Republican in the general election, but Ken Paxton is winning all the polls because they want someone that's more right and more Trump aligned. I think it's essentially the same thing in the Democratic Party. But reverse. James Talarico is the most likely to win in the general election, but while Jasmine Crockett is most likely to win the primary and lose the general election. It is. And when Ken Paxton is relatively the weaker nominee that the Republicans can put forward in a general election, and when the Democrats are set to win the 2026 midterms by a landslide in the House, and most likely win the popular vote in the Senate map in 2026, even when California is really not on the map. So if they can really shift the universal map by 5, the Democrats win the House pretty easily. We already knew that. But the Texas race becomes essentially a draw. 3.5 between Paxton and Talarico. And we assume that Talarico can flip these 3 counties in the suburbs of Dallas. And we assume that the Hispanic vote is trending left, like they did in 2018, the midterms, the 2018 midterms. Then we can see a real tight race between Ken Paxton and James Talarico in a state that Trump won by 13. This shouldn't be happening, but it is, where the Republicans are consistently underperforming in these elections during a Trump presidency. There is no way that this is going to be a slam dunk for any of these candidates, especially Ken Paxton. John Cornyn has proven himself to be more electable, but he is not the most likely to win the primary. Like I said, Ken Paxton is, but we're just going to have to wait until primary day.